Dude. Hi, I'm D with Paranormal Extraction, sitting in for the famous Zoe Starr. I'm going to give this the best shot I can. Today is our Halloween special for the month. Each show we have this month, we're going to be dressing up to honor our guest. Today's guest is Mr. Sean String, conspiracy theorist and awesome historian. He's going to tell us a story as to whether or not the United States knew that we were getting into war with Japan. A day that lived in infamy. Alright, I think I'm going to give Mr. Sean Straney the stage now shortly, and salute to all the military guys in this world. Hey, Sean, how was that for a little opening there? That was I painted my helmet nice the night before, out of respect for the veterans to start with, okay? All the veterans.
As a Navy veteran, I appreciate it.
Oh, nice. Well, I did quite a bit of research on some helmets of the day and Navy helmets, and so I just thought I saw quite a few personalized ones and things like that, and some different styles, like for the gunners and for the military and whatnot. But I saw a couple of where the guys just painted USN on there, so I just went straight. So, um, let's start. I'm getting instructed right now by my general to ask where we can find you. And
Well, I do have a Substack that I recently started called A Different Viewpoint. And one of the things when I was at the university, I was always known as being iconoclastic because I would do very thorough research for my term papers. And this is a way for me to get that iconoclastic viewpoint out there without worrying about censorship from the regular mass media, social media.
all right, and that's the name of that. Is one more time. Is called what?
A different viewpoint.
Different viewpoint, ladies and gentlemen. You can find Sean Straney. This guy, we just call him. What do we call him? Smarty Pants. Because
he's got all kinds of names.
Yeah, we like Smarty Pants. So, because he is amazing with knowledge, and I'll tell you what, check his site out, and check this show out, because I know there's a few people that are waiting for Sean to talk about this, and I certainly love this subject. So, Sean, we're going to go ahead and let you start. I believe you're going to start and let us know. Got my patent book here. What the state of America was when we started, before we started this. So why don't you give us the lowdown, sort of set the stage, soldier?
Well, just real quickly, after World War One, the United States had returned to a sense of isolationism. Going and fighting in Europe, the American people as a whole did not like it. So a Gallup poll that was conducted in 1940, 9% of Americans were pure isolationists. An additional 78% supported economic aid to Britain against Nazi Germany, but were completely against getting involved directly in the war. So you have a total of 87% of the American population did not want to go to war.
Right.
And we had two committees that were against the war also, that were always lobbying Congress, the America First Committee and the No Foreign War Committee. Okay. And they both worked in Congress to slow American military expansion and kind of be a stopgap against Roosevelt's desire to get into World War II.
Yeah, because we were already fighting Germany. Is that not correct?
Yeah, Germany at that time was already at war with the rest of Europe. They had already invaded France. They were bombing the tar out of Britain, trying to defeat Britain. They hadn't started Operation Barbarossa yet. They had done non-aggression pacts with Russia at the time, kind of to lull them into a sense of peace. because as we know, Hitler later on turned and did a surprise attack against Russia
Right.
through Poland.
Right. He started going across from Europe and spread himself so thin. Started the attack. So on that front, that's mainly the reason that America definitely wasn't interested in getting involved with Japan. Who was Japan?
Right.
Yeah. What was it? Who was Japan starting to attack? Weren't they attacking China and places like that before we came into the war? Before they
They
pulled us?
were. And
Yeah.
Japan believed they had an imperial destiny to be the leaders of Asia. So they had started invading China. They had started invading the Indochina Peninsula, where present-day Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia is.
Right.
They were trying to push the French out. They did not want Europeans on what they considered a greater Asian prosperity, and they believed it was actually their divine destiny to rule the Asian empire.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing that an island that size was taking on the continents of what is now Vietnam and China and Korea and all that area. It's pretty, I mean, they built up their military so big and they were so ruthless. So, and then for some reason they thought they needed to pull America in, and you're going to tell us why
Interestingly about Japan, they were never to be underestimated. I mean, in the Japanese-Russo War of 1905, they held off and defeated the entire Russian Navy.
Wow. Really?
Yeah. They won that war. And that's actually what kind of started leading towards Nicholas II's downfall as Tsar of Russia, because that was an embarrassing defeat for Russia.
All right.
But anyway, so the question they always use to kind of debunk the conspiracy theory of Pearl Harbor is they say, well, did Roosevelt have any direct intelligence that Japan was going to attack Pearl Harbor?
Right.
And it's kind of a lawyer type question. You're asking something so specific and narrowing it down that you can only answer no, and they use that to debunk the whole thing. But as we're going to get into, Roosevelt had plenty of knowledge Japan was going to attack.
Yep.
So, we had neutrality acts from the Johnson Act in 1935 up to the American Neutrality Act in 1937. But Congress did agree we needed to help Britain. So we started having economic and military aid to Britain, and Roosevelt wanted to expand it to the entire Lend-Lease program because he wanted to provoke Germany to declare war on us.
Wow.
But Hitler wasn't taking the bait.
Really?
So he turned and began focusing his attention on the Pacific and Japan. And the most condemning document towards this is what's known as the McCallum Memorandum. And the McCallum Memorandum is actually a SITREP, a situational report.
Yes.
And the subject of it was estimate of the situation in the Pacific and recommendations for action by the United States. Now, one thing that's interesting about a SITREP is when you have recommendations, they are to answer a specific question. And as they go through the SITREP, this is the recommendations that Commander McCallum made to the Department of Defense and to President Roosevelt. 1, make an arrangement with Britain for the use of British bases in the Pacific, particularly Singapore. This is part of the Lend-Lease program. We loaned destroyers to Britain. We got to lease their bases in the Pacific.
I see.
2, make an arrangement with Holland for the use of base facilities and acquisition of supplies in the Dutch East Indies. 3, give all possible aid to the Chinese government of Shanghai Shek. which we would later turn our back on him and support Mao Zedong.
Right.
Send a division of long-range heavy cruisers to the Orient, Philippines, or Singapore. Of course, we did send a detachment to the Philippines.
Yes.
Send 2 divisions of submarines to the Orient, which again were in Guam and the Philippines.
Right.
Keep the main strength of the U.S. fleet now in the Pacific in the vicinity of the Hawaiian Islands. In 1940, we moved practically the entire Pacific fleet from San Francisco and San Diego to Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
Our primary strength was the battleships and the aircraft carriers.
Definitely. Yeah.
Completely embargo all U.S. trade with Japan in collaboration with a similar embargo imposed by the British Empire and the Dutch. If by these means, and this is a quote from Commander McCollum, if by these means, if Japanese could be led to commit an overt act of war, so much the better. At all events, we must be fully prepared to accept the threat of war. So, with those recommendations, Roosevelt had to have asked specifically, what can we do to provoke Japan to make the first overt act of war?
Well, he had everything in place. He had all his chess pieces, I guess. Well, he figured with Britain, and it looks like he was trying to set it up like a chess game, doesn't it? It was positioning all the players in place, and then how did he actually provoke them then, Sean? What's one of
Well, with 87% of the population being against direct involvement in World War II,
yeah.
the only way that Roosevelt was going to successfully get the United States involved would be to have one of the 3 Axis nations attack us first. Italy was out of the question.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they were already suffering defeats in the Mediterranean, their navy from the British Navy.
Oh, really? Yeah, they didn't have.
Obviously, as much as he tried to bait Hitler, Hitler wasn't going to take the bait. And so the next thing was Japan.
Yeah.
So he moved our entire fleet to the Pacific, our entire Pacific fleet to Pearl Harbor, which the Japanese, of course, would see, oh, they're moving to a forward base. They're preparing to attack us.
So you feel that the Japanese in those days, even in those days, knew and saw with spies or whatever they were doing, or that we were actually moving all of our ships into the island of the Hawaiian Islands. And to them, that's definitely a military move. If they were bringing that much power over there, obviously Japan knew. When I was a child, not a child, but I was in high school when Tora first came out. Okay, so I had to see that because my dad and I watched war movies. He was just a guardsman here because he broke his back when he was in high school. Here's an interesting note: his dad was Navy. His name was John Clifford Darnell, and he was a Navy veteran. But what I took away from that movie, not only the action parts, was at the very end how they played up the fact that we knew they were coming, okay, and there was mistakes made by forward communications people, and they made it look like more like it was a mistake in those days, all blamed on some dudes on a hill that couldn't figure out what was coming over the horizon. And it sort of, even in those days, made me angry as a child that we would let that happen, or that kind of communication breakdown was going to let something as massive as Pearl Harbor happen. What do you think about that?
Well, Tora is an excellent film. It's a docudrama, but it was based on the academic work, also by the same name, Tora, of an excellent historian, Gordon Pranch. And Gordon Prange also wrote another excellent academic text, which we're going to touch on briefly. At Dawn We Slept. He's an excellent historian. He's a premier historian on the Pacific War. Right up there with Samuel Eliot Morrison, who was a Navy admiral and historian, Harvard educated. And Gordon Prange really, all the elements you see in Tora 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 are based on deep historical research that Prange did into the attack on Pearl Harbor. So out of any movies that cover that whole thing, that movie is probably the most accurate historically.
Interesting.
Now, of course, what was going on in Capitol Hill is interesting because Secretary of State Cordell Hull was still trying to negotiate a peaceful resolution, with Japan, trying to get Japan to pull back out of China and Indochina, trying to, have peace with Japan. And Cordell Hull actually complained to Stimson. He goes, every time we come close to a solution with Japan, President Roosevelt changes the conditions. It's almost as if he's trying to sabotage the peace process.
Oh.
And Cordell Hull says in a memorandum for Roosevelt, we cannot afford to take light of the tremendous seriousness of the present world situation confronting us. I want to repeat and emphasize what I said to Admiral Nomura on November 10th. And he goes on to talk about, how peace is more important than war. Roosevelt wanted no part of that. He wanted to get involved in the war. So now it comes down to, what did Roosevelt know and how soon did he know it?
Right.
And that's where the conspiracy theory comes in.
Yes, sir.
Now, like I said, they said the question they always asked to try and debunk the conspiracy theory was, did he have direct intelligence that Japan was going to attack Pearl Harbor? And the answer to that is no. He did not have a document in his hand that we had gotten from Japan saying we're attacking Pearl Harbor on December 7th. We had actually lost track of the flag officer code about a year previously, because as Japan was attacking China, they began redoing their flag officer code more and more frequently, to the point where they were changing it every 2 weeks.
Okay.
However, we had broken the Japanese diplomatic code, which they had not changed at all. Our nickname for it was the Purple Code. And you bring up Tora Tora Tora, if you remember the scene in the intelligence room when they had the two machines hooked up, and they were basically the diplomatic code, we were decoding and translating into Japanese in real time.
Oh, wow. They figured it out by then. We had it down by then, even though they were changing it up so often. We were on top of their codes, real time.
Well, the Purple Code they had not changed in a long time.
Okay.
It was well over a year.
Oh.
And we completely decoded it, and we had a machine set up that would decode and simultaneously translate the Japanese diplomatic communiques.
Wow.
So this is where it really gets interesting. What did Roosevelt know? How soon did he know it? So if you remember in Tora Tora Tora, General Bratton kept trying to warn everybody the Japanese are going to attack. It's in their diplomatic communique.
All right. Before the break, you were talking about General Bratton. Thank you. Thanks for clarifying. Go ahead and carry on with that, Sean.
Well, he kept trying to warn everybody that Japan was going to attack. He was interpreting the documents. Now, of course, his initial supposition was that Japan was going to attack right after Thanksgiving. It didn't happen. So when he actually got the 14-part message in real time, decoded it in real time, and read it, when he started sounding the alarm that Japan was going to attack, he figured Japan was going to attack Sunday morning, December 7th. Well, a lot of people in Washington said, oh, he's crying wolf again. So that they were very dismissive of it.
Really?
However, from Naval Archive records, Roosevelt actually had the completely decoded and translated 14-part message delivered to the White House by a Navy intelligence lieutenant at 10:30 a.m. Washington time, which was 3 hours before the attack happened.
Wow.
And Roosevelt sat on it.
Oh, man.
He had the 14-part message and the declaration of war in his hand at 10:30 a.m. at the White House Sunday morning, and he sat on it.
What? That's amazing.
Japan actually was more than 3 hours. Well, no, it's about 3 hours because Japan's attack happened at 1:30 p.m. Washington time.
Okay.
So 3 hours. He had it, and he sat on it. Now, the intelligence at the time had two places they expected Japan to attack. The Philippines, which of course they did launch a simultaneous attack against the Philippines, and Pearl Harbor. Two of them.
Yeah.
And another very damning testimony comes from Admiral Stark. And, for people that are interested in history, they know that Admiral Stark, who was the chief of naval operations, who was replaced by Admiral Nimitz, got blamed for mishandling the attack on Pearl Harbor.
Right.
Admiral Stark, in an interview with a couple of junior academics, Paul Burtness and Warren Ober.
Okay.
They interviewed Admiral Stark, a few years before Stark died. And they argued that Part 13 of the 14-part message was a clear message of the Declaration of War intent, which it was. Part 14 was actually a summary of the entire message. Admiral Stark, one of the things you see in Tora is they keep sending these messages out to Pearl Harbor, be ready for Japanese aggression, but don't take any action. And, Admiral Husband Kimmel is like, this is double talk. How do we interpret this? Admiral Stark told Ober and Burtness the reason for that was he was ordered by President Roosevelt to try and have Pearl Harbor be as prepared as possible without going on a full alert. And you mentioned the Japanese spies that were in Hawaii. Yes, there was a ton of them. They were waiters. They worked on farms that overlooked the base at Pearl Harbor.
Oh.
And you got to remember, Hawaii wasn't a state in World War II.
Oh, yeah.
We were leasing the base at Pearl Harbor from the Hawaiian government. Hawaii was still a U.S. territory, a protectorate, kind of like Puerto Rico is today.
Yeah, okay.
So,
very interesting.
So they had people working on the farms that would overlook the base at Pearl Harbor, and they were constantly reporting back on ship movements. That's how Japan knew that the carriers had actually left Pearl Harbor before they actually.
Good.
Excuse me.
Need some water?
Before they actually launched the attack, they knew the carriers weren't there because they had spies constantly reporting ship movements. They had waiters and people in bars, so when sailors would, be out on the town and they would talk about what was going on, They were making notes, sending all this information back to Japan.
Wow.
And Roosevelt knew this.
Yeah.
And he said, specifically to Stark, if we go on full alert, the Japanese spies will report back to Tokyo, and if they plan to attack Pearl Harbor, they will call off the attack because we're on full alert.
Got it. Playing possum.
Yeah, so they wanted to try and have the base of Pearl Harbor ready for an attack without having them go to full alert. And Admiral Stark says this was a direct order from President Roosevelt.
Wow.
And that's why, the communications prior to, during the month of November and going into, December sounded like double talk.
Okay.
Be ready for an attack, but don't take any action.
Okay.
Do this, but don't do that.
Right.
And it's like, how do we interpret that? What are we supposed to do? And they would put the base on alert, and when nothing happened, they would stand back down. So Roosevelt, that right there tells you Roosevelt knew Pearl Harbor was at least a potential target
Sure.
because of his specific orders to Admiral Stark. Let them know to be on alert, but do not go to full alert because Japanese spies in Hawaii will report back to Tokyo and they will call off any attack they have planned. Roosevelt knew.
I know.
And
I didn't realize, Sean, that that's some amazing information right there. So,
And Gordon Franch, who I mentioned, wrote the academic work Toro, 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 that the movie's based on, in At Dawn We Slept. Here's the timeline. And actually, I was incorrect. I said 10 o'clock. All right. So Gordon Franch states that our intelligence office had Part 14 decoded and translated by 7:30 a.m. Washington time.
yeah.
Now, in Tora, 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 that's the part where Bratton reads that 14th part and says, the Japanese are going to attack us. We're going to war.
Okay.
The morning intelligence package was delivered to the White House at 9:40 a.m. Washington time. A Navy lieutenant, intelligence lieutenant, placed Part 14 in the president's hand by 10 a.m. Washington time. The attack on Pearl Harbor happened shortly after 1:30 p.m. Washington time.
Yeah.
3.5 hours, Roosevelt had that 14-part message and sat on it.
We could have been completely
Now,
prepared in 3 hours for the attack.
yeah, he could have sent an alert to Pearl Harbor and said they're going to attack this morning. Now, Secretary of State Cordell Hull did not actually get the 14-part message delivered to him by the Japanese ambassadors until 2 p.m., a half an hour after the initial attack. And that's because at the Japanese embassy, they had to work through translating it and typing it up, and they had a mediocre typist who kept making errors, and they kept having to retype it. So Cordell Hull did not have the 14-part message in his hands till a half hour after the attack started. And this is why, it's considered, they attacked us and then declared war, and it's such a disgrace and everything. And this is the whole narrative that it was a completely surprise attack. We had no knowledge of it. It was a dirty trick, is based upon because the official delivery of the 14-part message by the Japanese ambassadors to Cordell Hull did not happen until 2 p.m.
Right. They planned it that way.
It was just problems with the Japanese embassy.
Yeah.
The emperor was very, very concerned about the Geneva Convention. He actually wanted the postcard message delivered to Cordell Hull a little before 1 p.m.
Right.
The Japanese ambassadors had their appointment set at, I believe it was 12:50.
I might. So they gave us a
So-
half hour, give or
No,
take.
they give us about 10 minutes.
10 minutes, yeah, 1 o'clock. Okay. So that
But-
at least he was.
But legally, according to the Geneva Convention, Japan would have declared war before the attack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
And they actually planned that the first planes would start dropping bombs at 7:05 Pearl Harbor time or 1:05 Washington time.
Oh.
So it
Okay.
actually would have been about 15 minutes, but it would have been within keeping with the Geneva Convention. It would not have allowed us time to, adequately prepare for the attack, and they could have given the Pacific Fleet that severe blow.
Sure. Some people, yeah. So in part of that, in that severe blow, the fact that the spies knew that the carriers and some of the battleships were out, and like, was it Nimitz?
Oh
or-
no, all the battleships were there at Pearl
Okay,
Harbor.
the some of the destroyers then, and the carriers, the main one, which one was out there? The Enterprise? Which one was the
Well,
big one?
they had 4 carriers, and they were actually sent out by Admiral Kimmel.
Right.
He told his carrier commanders, go out there and just start flying reconnaissance because we want to see if the Japanese fleet is out there.
Okay.
So
Kimmel.
Kimmel suspected something was going on.
So do you think? Let me break in. Do you think he sort of went against the orders, or took it upon himself as like a Kimmel went kind of rogue there against standing down?
He didn't go.
Oh.
He didn't go rogue, but he did show initiative in saying, "Hey, get out there and start looking around because if the Japanese fleet is out there, I want to know about it."
Oh, okay. Well, at least they.
So, he ended up getting relieved of his command, and it was kind of very unjust because out of all the people involved with Pearl Harbor, he showed some initiative. He told his carriers, get out there and start looking.
Okay.
So the Essex, the Lexington, the Hornet, and the Enterprise were all out at sea, flying their
Reconnaissance.
I'm trying to remember the exact name of the plane, but they were flying their sea-based reconnaissance planes around that area in the Pacific, trying to see if they could spot if there was actually an invasion fleet coming to Pearl Harbor.
Right. And they weren't quite sure the direction they were coming, obviously, or they would have planted there. They were a little south, if I'm not mistaken. But why they would do that, I'm not sure. But that's a pretty amazing twist. I had no idea about those details right there, that we were actually out there until later in my life, when I started learning a little bit more about this event, this amazing historical event for America. So at the same time, we're over there in Europe, had we just gotten involved? I asked that question already with war with Germany. We weren't, we didn't decide yet.
That was it. That was afterwards that we ended up going to Europe, and that's because basically, Roosevelt said in his famous Day of Infamy speech, he said, "Since Japan attacked us, a state of war now exists."
Okay, so he used it for an excuse, sort of,
with the Japanese Empire, but then. That following Monday, he considered the state of war with Japan to be a state of war with the entire Axis powers, which included Italy and Germany.
And okay. So my God, could you imagine being the American people in the Congress that didn't want to go to war? All of a sudden, we're in war with two superpowers at the same time.
Actually, when Congress voted, because constitutionally, the only part of the government that can declare war is Congress.
Mm-hmm.
President can't declare war. Only Congress can.
Right.
There was actually one vote and I would have to go back and look up who voted no, because it's kind of a side thing.
Mhm.
I didn't make a note on it.
Right.
There was actually one congressman who voted no to declare war against Japan and the Axis powers.
What? Okay.
Yep.
Oh, that's pretty. That's a stand-up character right there. I don't know what we would have done. We could have stayed out of both wars, and oh man,
But the American people were so shocked by this.
yeah,
And it was so played up that it was a surprise attack. It was a sneak attack. We had no knowledge of it.
right.
The Japanese were played. We basically began to hyper go to hyperbole and villainizing Japan.
Mm-hmm.
You see the propaganda at the time that that's where you start seeing the posters of the bucktooth stereotype Japanese with the
Right.
glasses and the
Yeah.
evil stare and killing people and everything. We went to
Yeah, we hyped it up.
hyperbole villainizing Japan. And so the morning of December 7th, as Americans are waking up and they're getting the news about the surprise attack and everything, they were so outraged. Suddenly we go from 87% of the population being against direct military involvement in World War II to about 75% saying we have to retaliate.
Okay, yeah.
You know,
They got us all fired up and rallied up, and everybody wanted to join the war, and then then the rest is history, of course. But that's how we seem to do things. Propaganda. Um, so it's always been a wonderful thing with me. That whole um, that whole mixing bowl of Japan and China, not China, but Germany, and getting us involved. And then how many years were we involved in with two different powers? How did they overlap?
and until 1945.
Oh,
May of 1945 is when victory in Europe, or VE Day, was declared.
okay.
And actually, the Russians got into Berlin first.
Mm.
And that's where that famous picture comes from. And it's a photo op. People try to say, oh, it's not a real picture. It is a photo op. But they were reenacting when they tore down the Nazi flag from the German Reichstag in Berlin and
Right.
raised the Soviet flag.
Okay.
But then again, when you see the footage of us raising the American flag on Mount Suribachi in Iwo Jima,
Yes.
yes, we actually did that, but the film footage is a reenactment of that,
Mhm.
a photo op and for morale purposes.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, Russia actually got into Berlin and got to both the Reichstag and the Fuhrer bunker. I think it was 5 days before United States got into Berlin.
That's amazing. So quickly we can close it up here with um, one of the interesting things that stuck with me forever was the you know the Roosevelt decisions and the what you've already covered with the knowledge and what sticks with you the most right now for in a quick closing right now, Sean, for you and your veterans, and how did you feel about it? Obviously, we have you on the show because you want to speak about it and we want to hear about it. What does Sean Straney think? What is his uh, most powerful thought on that? If you do that for us.
Well, Roosevelt was a progressive. He did, just like his predecessor in World War One, Woodrow Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
They both envisioned a new world order with America kind of leading that new world order,
Okay.
and he wanted another opportunity to try to do that. And so that's why that's the main reason why he wanted into the war.
Wow.
Roosevelt was not exactly good friends with Winston Churchill. He was good friends with Stalin. A very interesting book to read if anybody that in the audience is interested on the relationship of the big three, Stalin, Churchill, and Roosevelt, is the Kremlin letters. After the collapse of the Soviet Union and we have access to Russian archives, had the entire treasure trove of archives in Moscow of all the letters that happened between Stalin and Churchill, Stalin and Roosevelt. And it's interesting.
Yeah, I can
Very
imagine.
interesting read. And the second thing that sticks with me is not only that Roosevelt was more concerned with a new world order than he was with preserving American lives.
Okay.
The other thing is, and this is still a controversial topic to the day, did we need to drop the atomic bomb under Truman?
Right.
And what a lot of people don't know is that Japan was actually sending out feelers 6 months before we dropped the atomic bombs on Japan.
Yeah.
Sending out feelers to Russia saying that they wanted to surrender. They knew they were defeated.
Interesting, because I learned a quick little tidbit right here. Somewhere I learned that the fact that we dropped those bombs and we had developed them and we had told Japan not to continue the war, and we were trying to show Russia, who was trying to flare up and puff their chests up to the rest of the world, that America
Actually, Russia was not doing that.
they weren't.
They were not.
They weren't.
Russia was not trying to take over Europe and everything. This was preemptively agreed upon that once Hitler was defeated, the United States, Britain, France, and Russia would have zones of control in Europe to get rid of the rest of the Nazis, get rid of Nazi influence, and it was pre-established, pre-agreed upon.
Wow.
However, you are correct that the Potsdam Conference, which of course Roosevelt had died by this time, Truman was president. Truman actually took a detour through Germany and delayed the Potsdam Conference by 2 weeks because he wanted confirmation that the Manhattan Project was a success before he went into that meeting. And the last day of the Potsdam Conference, he told Stalin, he said, we have a terrible new weapon that will cause amazing destruction. Now, Russia had spies within our Manhattan Project. So Stalin knew in real time that we had already succeeded with the Manhattan Project. So he kind of just, flippantly said, good, I hope you put it to good use in the proper manner.
Wow.
Wasn't phased at all by, Truman trying to puff up.
Okay.
And this is kind of a misconcept about how the Cold War started. What a lot of people don't realize, NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, that treaty was signed in 1949.
Right.
The Warsaw Pact wasn't signed until 1953, and it was in response to NATO. Russia was actually on the defensive after World War II because Truman hated Russia. He was all about trying to dominate Russia in the future geopolitical spirit.
Wow. So that's pretty awesome, Sean. I'm going to have a lot of fun with this one. I hope that everybody's been waiting for this news gets what I got out of this, because your information is amazing. I am going to make this video. Not hopefully. I will make it very, very, very interesting for you, Sean, because we love having you on this show. And one more time with where we can find you, because I would like some people to get to know Sean Straney, because this man is amazing, historian. Okay, a little bit on the controversial side, right? With this type of information, we love it. That's why we're Paranormal Extraction. Let us know where you are one more time, Sean, and
I have a Substack called something I just started, but I am going to uh, be not only posting about current events, but also be posting about research I did when I was going for my master's degree. Uh, because like I said, in college, I was somewhat iconoclastic, and I did have a few professors encourage me because we believe that history has to be intellectually honest, not a narrative, not an agenda. We have to be intellectually honest about understanding history.
That's why
That's why I always that's why I always point out, especially with the current state of extreme Russophobia that's being pushed because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Uh, you know, people believe NATO was formed to combat Russian aggression, and like I said, and you can look this up. NATO treaty was ratified in 1949. The Warsaw Pact was not signed and ratified until 1953. Russia was actually defending against what it perceived to be a Western threat from NATO.
Right. That is amazing. Nice tie up. On that note, everybody that understands all this stuff that Sean said, maybe he taught you something today. We're going to check out of here. We're going to say goodbye to Mr. Sean Straney. Like we said, we jokingly call him Mr. Smarty Pants, but he's data for me and Zoe. Paranormal Extraction would like to say thank you, Sean, and say goodbye to all you wonderful veterans out there, and goodbye to all our fans. And we hope that you enjoy this wonderful, wonderful day with Sean Straney. Say goodbye, Sean. It won't be goodbye. We'll have you back again. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for having me. I always appreciate being on your show. And I follow you guys on YouTube, and I appreciate the work you do in attempting to get to the bottom of a wide variety of subjects.
We love you too, Sean. And thank you for joining Paranormal Extraction. I'm D, and I got to dress up today. And we salute the veterans of America. And please keep watching, subscribe, and love. Thank you.